asked Diana before she went to Australia, 2 or 3 days before, because I thought it would be a good idea that, apart from anything else, if she went to Australia, she could then think about it, and if she didn't like the idea, she could say she didn't, or if she did, you could say that, but in fact you actually said...
Yes, quite promptly.
I was absolutely determined that it was going to be as near a secret as possible on the actual day.
Engagement day for the Prince of Wales and Lady Diana Spencer, and an end to years of guessing who Prince Charles will marry. As Britain celebrates the wedding of the year, this program looks back at the life and career of the country's future king.
It has just been announced from Buckingham Palace that Her Royal Highness, the Princess Elizabeth, Duchess of Edinburgh, was safely delivered of a prince at 9:14 p.m., and that Her Royal Highness and her son are both doing well.
Birth in November 1948 brightened the gloom of a Britain still recovering from war. Delighted crowds stood for hours at Buckingham Palace, and the guns boomed their salutes all day in Hyde Park. Named Charles Philip Mountbatten Windsor, the new prince had ancestors going back 1,000 years to Alfred the Great and William the Conqueror. On this day, 3 royal generations gathered proudly at his christening. Among his warmest admirers, his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth. Over the years, she was to become his most trusted friend and confidant among the royal family. Prince Philip and Princess Elizabeth were determined that Charles should have as normal an upbringing as possible. There'd been none of the royal pampering that in the past had denied royal children the ordinary experiences of life. At first, the family lived quiet and private lives, but the royal duties of Princess Elizabeth increased as King George's illness worsened, and Charles spent more and more time with his Scottish nanny. He had a couple of housemaids too, a nursery footman and a detective to follow the baby carriage. Nanny Lightbody had a strong influence on Charles. She pampered him, certainly, but she was also firm and patient. He responded with shyness at first, but was soon devoted to her. In 1950, a sister for Charles with the birth of Princess Anne. By this time, Charles was developing into an active toddler, apparently eager for new adventures. But he didn't like crowds, a reaction he took years to overcome. In 1952, King George VI died after a long illness. Princess Elizabeth became queen, and Charles, now first in line to the throne, was more in the public eye than ever. His mother's coronation was made all the more memorable for millions of people through live television. It was a special treat for Charles, too, who looked a little bewildered inside Westminster Abbey. History in the making, but a yawn when you're only 4 years old. For the new queen, it would be harder than ever to raise her children in a normal environment. For Charles, just ordinary occasions like this, waiting for his grandmother at the station, were formal events, full of ceremony and disturbing ritual. Where Anne was bold and boisterous, Charles was timid and withdrawn. While Anne might play tricks on palace guards, Charles just looked at them in alarm. The 2 royal children were surrounded by warm family affection, despite the formalities of their parents' public duty. Charles sometimes recorded those formal occasions in his own way, in his drawings. But for the most part, he pictured his world much like any ordinary child. And it was as an ordinary child that Charles was to be educated. the Queen and Prince Philip boldly decided against the traditional private tutor, and so Charles became the first heir to the throne to go to school. But the trouble with a public education is that it is public, and it was soon obvious that Charles wouldn't be left alone. His progress was detailed in the press and newsreels, a kind of continuous school report for all the world to see. To escape this unwelcome attention, Charles was sent to Cheam, Prince Philip's old boarding school in the country. Here it was hoped he could live, work and play with other boys, with no special treatment and no prying photographers. Cheam was supposed to build self-reliance in Charles, make him tough, less shy and more sociable. But it didn't. It made him miserable. He missed his family and his privacy. Real friends were elusive, and his royalty confused him and embarrassed others. At 14, Charles went to another of his father's old schools, Gordonston, in the north of Scotland. The accent here was on character building in the rugged outdoors. But Charles wasn't like his father. Reserved and still shy, he didn't take easily to the Spartan life and group activities. While at Gordonston, he was hurt by a silly incident picked up by the press. One day, in a hotel bar, he asked for a cherry brandy, not aware that he was underage. The newspapers pounced, and a misleading photograph was used cruelly against him. His first sour taste of bad publicity. From Scotland to Australia, Timbertop, a rugged school in the Australian bush, gave Charles a new opportunity. Timbertop boys were tough and boisterous, but open and down-to-earth too. Australia was a turning point for Charles. He was out of the public eye and social barriers were down. Friendships were more honest, with boys unimpressed by his royal position. While Charles was learning how to save lives on Bondi Beach, his further education was being debated back in London. He qualified for university and chose Trinity College, Cambridge, the first royal prince ever to take a full degree course in open competition. At university, Charles gained measurably in self-confidence. He was an average, hard-working history student, but he also liked playing the fool as the fall-down comic, the royal knockabout clown in silly situations. He made his stage debut in a college review.
And here I am, showing just how adaptable the sports commentator can be. All alone on in a deep-sea fishing boat with just my rod and line, the great unknown, a few helicopters and as if, but yes, I do believe I got a bite. I have a bite. I'm letting out a little slack now. Yes, taking up the strain. It is most exciting, ladies and gentlemen. I've never seen anything quite like it before. I think I got quite a large one here. It's very, very large indeed.
Aberystwyth College in Wales was next to welcome Charles when he arrived for a quick course in the Welsh language. 10 years before, the Queen had promised Wales its own prince, a 600-year-old tradition that Charles took seriously. His crowning was now only a few months off, and Charles made sure he could speak to the Welsh people in their own tongue. While still at Cambridge, Charles learned to fly. Clumsy and slow at most team sports, he showed a natural individual flair at the controls of a plane. Flying revealed the thrill-seeker in Charles, the loner who liked to challenge himself. Not surprising, then, that he should welcome his family's suggestion to join the armed forces. It was as a flyer and sailor that he now shone with confidence and maturity. He won his wings with the Royal Air Force, commended for his wide skill in flying and jet-speed aerobatics. Charles was in his element now, able and proud to stand beside his father as his equal. I'm stupid enough to like trying things," was how he described his first parachute jump. It was yet another royal first, but the Queen had been alarmed at the idea and agreed to it only with reluctance. And it wasn't all plain sailing. His feet got caught in the rigging lines on the way down. He summed it up later as a hairy experience. From flight lieutenant to sub-lieutenant in the Navy, Charles passed through the doors of Dartmouth College 40 years after his great-uncle Dickie, Earl Mountbatten, had become First Sea Lord. But Charles had stopped competing with his ancestors. He was now setting his own pace and developing his own talents. Helicopters, said Charles, are very exciting, but sometimes bloody terrifying. He once learnt that the hard way when an engine failed and he landed quicker than he expected. 5 years and 8 ships later, he was given command of a minesweeper in the North Sea, a well-earned promotion. Naval training had left its mark. Charles was now decisive, commanding, and impressive, especially to a younger brother.
Speed is possible, because then you can break through the pressure wave on the stern, and you would then avoid the danger of being sucked in or out. You have to time it just right to take the revs on, you see, when you pass the stern, and then put them back on again. You've got to get bloody close before anything happens, really. And even then you just bump. But what you don't want to be, all right if you bump, you're in line. But if you're slightly ahead, that's the difficulty, you know, it's not so easy then.
Royal duties had been running side by side with his naval career. They'd started with his investiture as Prince of Wales in 1969. Before the ceremony at Carnarvon Castle, a huge build-up of publicity and a mountain of cheap souvenirs. But Charles himself was serious about his Welsh connection and eager to leave his own dignified mark on history.
I feel that it is a very impressive ceremony. I know perhaps some people would think that it is rather anachronistic and out of place in this world, which is perhaps somewhat cynical. But I think it can mean quite a lot if one goes about it in the right way. I think it can have some form of symbolism.
God bless the Prince of Wales, they sang. Those mighty Welsh voices bore the message of the people who were to welcome Prince Charles as their own. This young man was ready to take up his royal office to serve the proud race who opened their hearts to both him and his mother, the Queen, on this historic July the 1st.
For me, it's a way of officially dedicating one's life, or part of one's life, to Wales. The Welsh people, after all, wanted it. I think also that the British, on the whole, tend to do these sort of ceremonies rather well. And for this reason, you know, it's done well, in fact. And I think it's been very impressive, and I hope other people thought so as well.
I, Charles, Prince of Wales, do become your liege man of life and limb, and of earthly worship. And faith and truth I will bear unto thee, to live and die against all manner of folks.
An indication of the closeness
The new Prince of Wales was soon off to America. In Washington, President Nixon made too much fuss, which irritated Charles and upset Princess Anne.
Not an official visit. We want you to feel very much at home in your brief stay. We want you to get to know our capital, our Congress, and also we hope you get
Anne's
to know
face gave away her feelings. Charles was more diplomatic.
At the occasions that you will be attending here.
Little did we expect that the first and the only house we would stay in on our first visit would be the White House.
Charles had seen his investiture as a solemn obligation, a commitment to serving the people. Wherever he goes, people take his interest. He chats and questions, eager to get into the spirit of the occasion. Charles enjoys this role-playing, and the media have often been quick to satirize it. On the whole, he's fairly tolerant of the media's demands on him, and on occasions even finds some humor in being a target, as here when he presented some British press awards.
Now I say, what an enormous pleasure it is to see so many familiar faces gathered in this room. And I rather feel that being here today is rather like asking a pheasant to award the prizes to the best shot. And speaking as a pheasant, with an H, you've been wonderfully sporting shots. Because I've only got a few pellets in my backside, and you haven't yet brought me down.
One of the prince's long-term interests is in the development of industry and commerce. In France, his great-uncle Dicky introduced him to the wine trade and the complexities of the European marketplace. Industrial methods were a mystery to Charles, but he set about unraveling them in the best way he knew, by seeing for himself. He tours factories all over Britain, talking to managers, workers, and trade union leaders. He prods, questions, and criticizes, always eager to learn.
I intend to make the opportunity to go around and find out a lot more, meeting people, finding out how management of unions really do operate on the sort of grassroots level, so that I can, I hope, be of more use.
The value of this barnstorming through industry is hard to assess, but he's won the genuine admiration of workers and employers alike for his energy, good humor, and enthusiasm. Charles tackles leisure with a similar energy and the same desire to try new experiences. Like his father, the prince feels at home on a boat and readily accepts invitations to go sailing. But whatever the sport, Charles can be seen as a man of adventure, like a hero of the silent screen. screen heroes attract kisses, and Prince Charles has run into his fair share. He's been kissed by pretty girls around the world, a trend he's not discouraged. His deeper friendships with girls have shown a kiss-and-run style of their own. The rich royal bachelor, surrounded by eligible girls, gave the newspapers a guessing game they played happily for years. There was Penelope Eastwood, Davina Sheffield, then Sarah Spencer, sharing his love of polo. The press was sure he'd married Jane Wellesley, his close companion for several years. But the cameras soon turned on brewery heiress Sabrina Guinness when she appeared at his side. Where friendships didn't exist, they were sometimes invented. That blue dress worn by Sabrina was seen later on another young lady, the fantasy of a German magazine, Princess Marie Astrid of Luxembourg. She didn't even know Charles. The picture was a fake. But why had the Queen just visited the Pope? Did her son want to marry a Roman Catholic princess? All concerned denied it. The press were relentless. When Lady Diana Spencer became the latest girl in the prince's life, she was pursued with a vigor that bordered on harassment. The 19-year-old daughter of Earl Spencer, a Sandringham neighbor of the Queen, Diana was a working girl, a teacher in a central London kindergarten. For months, she faced cameras and questions with composure and good humor.
Can you wind the window down for a picture?
A royal test, perhaps, which she passed with distinction, confirming Prince Philip's view of the monarchy. People like us tend to marry within our own circle. A home for the Prince and Princess of Wales is already waiting. Highgrove House in the Cotswolds, close to Princess Anne. Like most of the royal family, Prince Charles prefers life away from London, either at Balmoral or here at Windsor. Gatherings like this at St. George's Chapel at Christmas reaffirm the close family ties he's known since birth. Prince of Wales and future King of England. For Charles, a demanding role, but not now a lonely one. For Diana Spencer will now share his future, and share too his old family pledge, I serve.
It was 1977 that Charles came to stay as a friend of my sister Sarah's for a shoot. We sort of met in a ploughed field.
Well, I remember thinking what a very jolly and amusing and attractive 16-year-old she was. And, I mean, great fun, and fancy and full of life and everything. And I don't know what you thought of me.
Pretty amazing. I had a long time to think about it, because I knew the pressure was on both of us. And well, it wasn't a difficult decision in the end. It's what I wanted. It's what I want.
Just delighted and happy. And I'm amazed that she's been brave enough to take me on.